Well, you know when you lie back in the thing to get hair washed, I would vomit. I would, like, when they first started to touch my hair, I'd have to go and be sick.
Okay, now I'm going to start my real life as Monica Lewinsky, whoever I was supposed to be, and came out and couldn't get a job.
We'd faced our demon, and we'd done it in the place where it happened as well. We sat outside the house that I lived in, and I just couldn't go inside.
But I liked him and the whole thing. And I was fucking 14.
Right.
You know.
That's illegal.
So, hi, everyone. For today's episode, I spoke with my dear friend, Alan Cumming. We met 25 years ago at a party where we were sitting in a booth, and the people in the booth next to us, someone leaned over and started to touch my hair. And I said to Alan, sort of quite frightened, that someone was petting me. And we had a moment and kind of both knew that we were going to be good friends ever since then. So you probably know him as an actor, presenter, author, and host of the hit show Traitors. I've known Alan for so long and so intimately. I wasn't surprised in our conversation when he talked about how abusive his dad had been, but I was really surprised to learn that he had also been groomed by an older man when he was a teenager. So it was a little heartbreaking for me, but I hope you find something to connect to in our chat, and thanks for joining us on Reclaiming. Thank you to our presenting sponsor, Audible. Visit audible.com/reclaiming to find your next listen. Thank you to our sponsor, Reformation. Visit reformation.com to see why they're my go-to for stylish and sustainable fashion. I was thinking this morning, I was awake at 5 a.m.
Oh.
Lying there, nervous. And
so this is your first one. You're popping your cherry with me.
Yeah, exactly. Popping my
your
podcast host cherry.
Love.
Exactly. And I was nervous, and I was thinking about two things. One was, I did the math. We've actually now known each other for 25 years. Because we met in 99. I checked on the calculator.
Was it 99? I thought it was 1,000. I thought it was early 1,000.
No, I'm pretty sure it was 99 because I did
we could find out, because remember that when I wore that terrible outfit? It was the night we met. I was wearing a terrible
Wait, is that the
green...
one when we were both? Oh, right. And I was in green also. We looked like
so we
twins.
Looked
like leprechaun twins.
Maybe
Probably
that was
can't
99.
Say
Anyway, it was a couple of months later, but it wasn't. Yes, but yeah.
So I was thinking,
quarter of a century.
I know, exactly. So our 25-year friendiversary. And then I was also thinking about that in the 25 years I've known you, I've never been nervous to talk to you.
Except now.
Exactly.
Oh, you're not nervous now, are you?
I'm a little less nervous, but I'm nervous.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit of a perfectionist.
Well, it's good to be nervous, Monica, because it means you care.
Yeah. Do you still get nervous?
Yes, of course. Yes.
Really? Okay, with everything? Or do you...
Well, with new things, I get nervous when I do my concerts. Like, I've got a new concert show, it's called Uncut. Mm-hmm. And I've only done it about 6 times. So and there's always a big gap before I do it again. So I get really nervous with that.
I found this thing from 2001. Okay.
Oh, what is it?
I printed it out. This is part of an email you sent me.
Uh-oh.
If you feel comfortable reading it on the thingy, you can, but you could read it first.
November the 22nd, 2001. Dear Monica, last night I finished reading your book, Monica's Story, and I'm so shocked and horrified. When I first came to America and the whole scandal was everywhere, I thought that it was a horrible thing because you were caught up in a political revenge thing and that you were a little pawn being used by Starr to get at Clinton. And I thought that you were young and in love. And I also remember being so horrified at the way the media vilified you, but I had no idea how much more painful and disgraceful the whole thing was. Wee Monica, I can't imagine how awful it all was. And also I am so amazed that you've come through it to be the fabulous and beautiful person that you are today. Brava, brava. I hope this hasn't churned it all up again for you, but I don't think you should ever stop being told how abused you were by the American so-called justice system. Your dignity and loyalty throughout it all is the only light that shines. I'm giving thanks that you've come through it all and are a lovely person and my friend. Love and peace from Alan. Monica, I'm going to need a little hand.
I know.
I love you.
And this was like
23 years ago.
I know, but part of why I wanted to do this with you, like for my first You were always the first one to do, like, there was no question for me about, and it's just, I think you have both witnessed a lot with me in our friendship, and you have inspired me so much, and I've learned so much from you.
There's not a word in that I would change in terms of how I still feel. I mean, obviously other things have happened, but I'm always amazed that you are as sane and as kind and as well balanced and as sort of vulnerable as well. You know, you went away kind of in sort of your wilderness years and kind of hid.
Yeah.
And then but you've come, I mean, it's incredible actually. It's incredible to me that you have, well, you know, survived and sort of blossomed.
Thanks.
And also I think it's really interesting, you know, now what would be the difference now? And you know, I've become chums with little Dylan Mulvaney.
Right.
And we were just thinking about, she's another person who I feel like came through something awful and sort of vilified on a sort of massive scale. But with the sort of the sort of social media turnaround thing and the way it kind of, she's bounced back so much. I mean, she's still obviously damaged and she's had a terrible thing. But I think in a way that nowadays our sort of, the cycle of all that is much faster.
Oh, 100%.
Whereas in your day, or you know, that day, it was there for such a long time. In a funny sort of way, I think social media and things sort of flushes things out in a way. It's not necessarily always a good thing,
right?
Because it flushes out truth and facts, and you know, and it's not just about. I said to Grant about, you know, people are so ill-educated, and I don't mean they've not gone to college and things like that, because there's some people who've got degrees and whatever, but they're ill-educated in, you know, they spout these things that are clearly not true. And I don't know how long it will take to make that better.
Yeah. No,
That's
I don't.
What worries me.
I don't either. It's, but I feel like we've mentioned Grant. And
Grant's my top international husband.
Exactly. I think the two best things that come with you, right, are Grant and Mary Darling.
Mary Darling.
Who's Alan's mom.
She'll be so excited I'm doing this with you.
Oh, I love to tell everybody the story from your wedding, how she made the cake in Scotland and brought it down on the tree.
I know. And then she's so happy because the chef wanted to speak to her about how moist her cake was.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's got a picture of her kind of talking to the chef and being so flattered. Terrible. But she's in good form, yes.
Oh, good. I remember you said something at some point about that when you were growing up, it was like did you call it a Scottish Downton Abbey?
I grew up on a country estate, but the Downton Abbey house had been demolished because there was a thing. It's a terrible thing, actually. There's a really good book called Scotland's Lost Houses or something. So there's a thing where in the 50s, I think it was, the death duties for all these families, these sort of, you know, it was a time of change where, like, you know, there was the welfare state was starting, Labour got in after the war, all this stuff, the world was changing. And all these big houses, the families, when they died, the death duties were so much that what they did was they took all the good things out of the houses, all the marble and the blah, blah and everything, and then they blew them up so they wouldn't have to pay the duties on it or the tax.
Oh, really?
So there's all these amazing... I mean, we've got like
bonkers.
It's nuts, but we've got a load of them, so it wasn't.
Okay.
But it was all these kind of more sort of grand, Victorian-y, you know, type things. So I lived on a country estate. My father was a forester. I mean, it was very Downton Abbey. There was like gamekeepers, trapper, you know, like all that. And there was the big house, but it was gone. All that was left was the stables and the chapel. In the chapel, we had sort of like, you know, estate dances and dances and Christmas parties, and the stables were for shoots. And so there was beating. I did beating. You had to bang the tree so the pheasants would fly up, so those rich old white guys with guns could shoot them, and stuff like that. So it was very sort of feudal.
Right.
But the Downton Abbey bit was missing. When we first moved to that estate, I think it was owned by a shipping heiress.
Okay.
And then a big insurance company bought it.
Right. And your childhood there, like you were talking before about your hair and getting your hair cut and the whole thing. And I was thinking about how it's funny that in the 25 years, I think every time I see you, your hair is different. And I was like, for me, if it's been 6 months, I'm like, am I up 20 pounds or am I down 20 pounds? So, what's Alan's hair? What's Monica's weight? But there's like a great, I mean, not great, but.
No, a completely of correlation of my abusive childhood and my father's obsession with my hair. I mean, obsessed with my hair and my brother's hair. And my book, first memoir, Not My Father's Son, I talk like the first thing is just him going into a rage and then just shearing my hair with these sheep clippers. You know, I had short hair. I mean, I always have like a short back and sides. It was always but if it was a tiny bit too long or something, he would go nuts, and I don't quite understand it. But it made me, various things happened. Like when I left home, went to drama school, I would get, when you lie back in the thing to get hair washed, I would vomit. I would, like, when they first started to touch my hair, I'd have to go and be sick.
Oh my
That happened
gosh.
a few times. Since then, I changed my hair all the time. It's a sort of it's my power. Like I feel like I was so controlled.
How were you controlled, Alan?
Controlled in several ways. In the first way, just living in fear, living in absolute fear, and secondly, of being controlled by violence, being hit regularly, daily almost, and also being controlled by becoming constant barrage of negative things about myself being told to me, that never good enough, always a waste of time, But also at the same time, my dad said things like, I remember once he said to me, if you fell out of a window, you'd fall up the way. That he was really jealous of me, of my good fortune.
Wow.
Isn't that funny? And then also being controlled because I would have to work. I would have to work on the estate. I used to get a pay packet from my father. He used to it was a certain number of hours worked, and I would.
Wow.
I was his employee. And so I just would, every evening, every Saturday, I'd have to work on the estate. I'd weed the seed beds, later I'd do more physical things. So that I was like a sort of,
Yeah, that's
serf.
controlling.
Yeah, it's control. All those are controlling. And I'm just like, I know I'm getting my hair cut tonight. Before I go out, I want to run from this room right now and get it cut. It's just sort of, I don't really, but you know what I mean? I'm
You like me.
Yeah, I'll be fine. But it's a sort of, it's an interesting sort of how you take something negative and you make it your own, and you make it, it's sort of like, I can have my hair as many ways as I like.
Did you do, because you were young, so did you do work on that, personal work on that, before you sort of took the power of, your hair back in the way that your hair became sort of a rebellion?
Well, I think I feel everything about my understanding of my past and my, the way that I processed and understood what had happened to me and how it affected me and how I became, and how all that stuff was post being 28.
Okay.
Last week I was a little sick for a few days, and it's my body telling me to slow down. Mm-hmm. And I think that's so great. In the days that you've got off, it knows to do that. And like the way that my body as a little boy didn't allow me to retain memories because it was too much to deal with. And so it wasn't till I was grown up enough and I was about to become a father, actually, I think that was the other thing, that all these things exploded and I remembered all these things. And then that's when I started to sort of understand and get better, and also realize that, this person I've been is a product of all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And now I don't really want to be that person. I want to find out who actually I want to be, as opposed to being controlled by negative, terrible things that happened. So I think it was then. I think it was like after age 28. Although before that, I remember once actually when I was at drama school, and when there's a thing you can get haircuts by the sort of baby haircut. Yes, practice haircuts. You get them for free, and students go. So I went, and they wanted to do a color in my hair, and I came out with purple hair, and I was just like, oh my God! And I was going home for the weekend from drama school. And it was past the time when my father I was an adult then, so he was still scary, but he wasn't violent anymore.
Yeah, because he was physically abusive.
Physically very abusive.
Really
very.
abusive.
And so I went home and I thought, oh my God. So I wore entirely purple to sort of think that it might deflect my purple
Like
hair.
Violet Beauregard.
I'd like a purple sweater and a purple. I just wore purple, so I'd be this kind of blur of purple, and they wouldn't sort of. I don't know, but nobody said anything actually, hilariously. But I realized things like that. I look back and I think, oh, I did have sort of even before I'd sort of hair, sort of. I used hair as a sort of a thing, but it wasn't till, I mean, talking about the fact that your father, whilst you're screaming and crying, and he's holding you down and shearing you with sheep shears, talking to other people about that, you then are, it's horrible. And then, but also you see people's reactions, and you're like, oh yeah, that's right. That was fucking insane and just awful. So I think after that, that's when I started to think, oh, I can do that. I don't have to protect that person.
Yeah.
I can say that weird thing happened to me. Yeah.
I think I feel very mindful in my life just because my family got so exposed early on, and it was so negative, and there was, I think there was so much embarrassment and exposure for them too, that I feel ultra protective.
Right.
But so what's interesting to me about what you're saying with the 28, like in this 28-year-old period, going to become a father, and you were married to a woman at the time, not Grant. So
Grant's not a woman.
Yeah, nope. But it's interesting to me because I had similar experience in terms of just becoming more aware of traumatic experiences that I hadn't thought of as traumatic. And for me, I had to have done a certain level of healing. So I think it was kind of after I came sort of back out into the public arena, started attempting to take back my narrative. And I think there was a point where I felt, on some version, my body, my psyche felt safe enough that it was, I was in therapy and saying this, thing. It was like, oh yeah, but that happened. That didn't count.
Right. Oh, is this when you talked about Me Too? When you did that essay? I thought that was so great because I think you spoke for a lot of people who, that sort of, I wonder if I'm allowed to be in this gang.
Yeah. So really the Me Too that we saw in 2017 was Me Too 2.0, right? Yeah. And so, because Tarana had started the movement 10 years earlier, and it was so fascinating to me with my social psychology background, to observe how when I put Me Too, everybody assumed I was talking about 98. And I actually was talking about this other experience and several others that I had that were sort of what I was mentioning before in terms of this, something that I had always talked about, like having lost my virginity at 19.
Yes.
And I was in therapy. I had been with this therapist for, 5 years at this point. And I was like, well, technically I was 14, but that didn't count.
Right.
And that whole, and her sort of talking me through, no, that's an unwanted sexual experience, no, but I liked him, and the whole thing. And I was fucking 14.
Right. That's illegal.
So, and and there was no consent, wasn't a thing, and the whole whatever. But what we also see, right, is like Vessel Bandelkork, I never say his name right, but the body keeps the score. And so the reality is, like you were saying about when you were 28, that you had suppressed all these memories.
Yeah.
And so they were living in you.
Oh, they were there,
They were there.
Yeah.
And so it just is, so sometimes it can take a long time to see the damage. Like they'll say about a car accident, if you've like hurt your neck in a car accident, that may not, show up for 10 years, like the actual damage.
True.
And so I think that's what's sort of...
Yeah, trauma is sort of, I mean, I think there was a thing that I really loved when I was writing one of my books, that I discovered this thing. It's called afterwardsness. But I can't remember what the German word is, that Freudy thing.
Always the German or Japanese. It's always, right, the best words.
Yeah, it's a really good waiting for Guffman kind of word. But it was about this idea that it's not like, delayed trauma, because it wasn't traumatic then. You see what I mean? It was, so how something traumatic happens to you and you go, that didn't happen. And then you go on, and then 10 years later you're like, it's not that, because there wasn't trauma. You only have trauma when you think about it afterwards. So it's sort of, so the trauma is in your more mature adult understanding, or not necessarily adult, but in your later understanding and your values looking back at an instant that when you were there at the time, you didn't.
That's so interesting. I have to think about that because my initial reaction is I don't agree with that. But
And what do you mean?
well, I think in the sense that if there had not been any element of trauma in that experience, we wouldn't be making the connection. We wouldn't be drawing the line from a later thing looking back at something. I think we just may not experience it in the linear way that we look at trauma or think of trauma.
Right, I see. But it's also it's not saying there wasn't trauma. There's trauma now.
Right.
I mean, I sort of understand it because this thing happened to me that I totally had, a sort of a sexual relationship with an older man when I was, a teenager.
Oh, I don't know this.
Oh, well, it's true. And then I realised that actually technically it was illegal because of my age in Scotland at the time. And then I just actually thought, wow, actually that's really bizarre. And the more I thought about it, and the more I sort of examined the thing, I realized I was kind of slightly groomed. I don't think I had any at the time. I felt liberated actually by it. I felt empowered by it, and I felt it was sort of fun and kind, and I felt good about it. It wasn't until many years later that in the light of in my 50s or whatever, I look back on that and I thought, ew.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean.
Yeah.
See the difference?
Yeah.
I mean, and now I still don't even think it was a traumatic experience for me. I still believe it was all these things, but it's within the context, it feels different now.
Thanks so much to Audible, our presenting sponsor. This year, why not let Audible expand your life by listening? Explore over 1 million audiobooks, podcasts, and exclusive Audible originals that'll inspire and motivate you. Just open the app and tap into your well-being with advice and insight from leading influencers, experts, and professionals. You'll find titles that enrich your life, relax you, and the ones I like best, titles that make you laugh. Whatever your focus or interest, there's a listen for it on Audible. Ultimately, it's all about starting good habits. Making a positive change is the best goal you can make for yourself, and Audible can help. There's so much opportunity and more to imagine when you listen. Let Audible help you reach the goals you set for yourself. Start listening today when you sign up for a free 30-day trial at audible.com/reclaiming. Thanks so much to our sponsor, Reformation. I want to take a second to talk about one of my favorite clothing brands, Reformation. You've probably seen Reformation on Instagram or at a wedding. They make the best guesting dresses. But if you're like me, you may have thought that's all they do. Well, you're in for a pleasant surprise. Last year, they worked with yours truly and Vote.org on a campaign to empower voters to take part in the democratic process and show off their workwear. From doing the campaign and getting to know the brand even better, I love their sweaters, blouses, workwear, shoes, and bags. But most important, I love how confident I feel in their stuff. Plus, it really holds up since they make everything with super high-quality, sustainable materials. Reformation is also a brand that uses their growing platform to do good in the world, and especially in the sustainable fashion space. As they say, being naked is the #1 most sustainable option. Reformation is #2. If you're looking for clothes you want to feel great in and feel better about, head to reformation.com. I know in the 28 period, right, when you were 28, then you started to confront the stuff with your dad, your dad's abuse.
Yes.
And can you tell me that story?
How it all happened? Well, I was married to my ex-wife and we were trying to have a baby. And I was sort of, quite successful. I was living in London. We had a big house. We were all sort of, bought a big house so we could have kids and all that stuff. I think when you decide to become a father, you think, oh, well, I've got to have a life I've got to be secure and I've got to be sorted out in order to bring this person into the world. And therefore that brings up feelings about your own father and your own family and your own thing. And that is what did it for me. And that's what was the sort of catalyst for all this all these memories to come out. Because I still, I mean, I haven't had children, and I still, if I'm honest, worry that as much therapy as I've had, and as much as I'm a kind person and blah, 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 would I have the kind of DNA of being, not that I feel I would be an abusive father, but I don't know. It scares me. Being a father scares me because I am in a lineage of someone who is, my father, obviously mentally ill and sort of psychotic and, a variety of personality disorders. But that I think my body said, you better get your shit together because you can't just swan into this. Mm-hmm. You've got a lot of stuff to deal with about what it is to be a father and what happened to you as a child of a father. So that's what happened. And then it all kind of came out. I was overwhelmed, was feeling like I was insane, was also feeling I needed to get out of my marriage. I needed to change my life. I needed to do all these things. It was not a good time for any of those things to happen.
Never is.
Never is. And yeah, I sort of went under. I went to, it's so crazy, but I went to Primrose Hill. I rented a little bed sit in Primrose Hill. I sort of moved out of my marital home and sort of went there and kind of waited for it all to sort of happen. And
that's so brave.
Was it? I suppose.
Yeah.
I mean, I just sort of felt I was hiding. I mean, I was hiding, but I knew I couldn't. Having obviously my ex-wife she was freaking out because all of a sudden it's gone from us trying to have a baby and and this idyllic life to me going, I don't want to have a baby. I think I want to leave you. I've got to get away. So I couldn't do all this in that environment, and I tried to explain that to her, and so off I went to my little bed sit, and and was going to therapy and then spoke to my brother and my mum and. It all kind of things. So luckily I was able to take a few months off and just let it all come out. Mm-hmm. It was like having overwhelmed with all the memories washing over you and thinking, can that be true? Did that happen? And, all that stuff. And luckily, I had my brother to back things up.
The amazing Tom.
The amazing Tom. And
were you worried when Tom started to have kids? Were you did he have the same concerns about fatherhood that you had?
I don't think with his first child, because that was before this. Uh-huh. But I think shortly after that, he then had other kids. Uh-huh. And I think so. And he then, he did some work and was in a men's group and stuff like that. And, I think he was much more conscious of it. But I mean, I feel like so lucky that I was able to just basically go, hey, my agents and everyone, I'm having a nervous breakdown. So I'm having a couple of months off my top international career. That's easier to do when you have a job like that. When you have a real job, it's harder to do that. You've got to kind of do it in increments. And I think what you're saying about your family and what they were exposed to, I felt like, I've made him go through this too. Mm-hmm. Or it was a little later for him, but I've brought this all up for all of us, me and my mum and him, but especially him. And
okay, wait, sorry. So I'm not sure I understood this before. Was Tom cognizant of the abuse, or had you both pushed it away?
We both pushed it away. I don't quite know. I don't know to which level of
interesting
that he had done it, but we never talked about it. It was not. It was, I talk in the book actually about the silence in our house. This sort of tension of just like none of us really. We had we would reference it like, be careful. He's in a terrible mood, or just things like that. But you would never really, when something is so constant for years and years, you don't think, oh my God, this is crazy, because it's just your life.
It just is.
It just is. And also he was 6 years older than me, which is kind of a weird gap. When I was 10, he was 16. So, and he left, and got married. And so then I was on my own with my dad for a while, that was the worst bit. But I feel, as adults, we'd sort of say a little bit, maybe after a few drinks, it's Dad was pretty crazy, but never really truly in sort of embracing it and dealing with it. So it wasn't. So I did that, and I sort of that was another sort of whip myself even more. I'm affecting my brother and his life, and by doing this. But he was really great and really supportive. And also what's great is just to have someone to, because in that situation, you're so worried about being believed. You know, you just think people are not, and some people didn't.
Really?
Yeah, like my ex-wife. So I think she did eventually, but
Right.
she said to me that I was using it as an excuse to get out of the marriage, and she was angry, and she was just, you know.
Yeah.
So you're so tender
Right.
and you're so raw that you can't actually, and that pushed us apart even further because you can't be around people who don't believe you. It's just too much.
Well, I think
'Cause you can hardly believe it.
Yeah. I think that's one of the hard things, particularly about trauma and abuse when you're young, is that it sort of, you become, it's like you are able to gaslight yourself, you know, and you become very proficient at it.
Yeah.
You become very proficient at, it's my fault,
Yeah.
or it didn't happen.
It wasn't that bad.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Happens to everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody's got trauma, all these things. Yeah.
I mean, that's sort of
and that
true.
is true, but yes, exactly. But
yeah.
And so
So as you were going through this, were you talking to your dad at this
oh
point?
no, we kind of would go a duty visit once every few years.
Okay.
Just because where my in-laws at the time lived was right by where I'd grown up. So but no, he wasn't really in our lives, and he was with someone else, and it was a duty thing. It was just sort of a terrible, and never speak to him. Then all this happened, and it was my mum actually who. Oh, I know. I was going to say the thing about when you worry about how your family are being exposed because of this trauma that you've made public, or it has been
public
a
within the family, public.
That, but also public within the world.
Okay.
Which is what happened to you initially, but was what I chose to do later by writing about it. That was another sort of cycle of, oh my God, my poor family are going to have to deal with this. But actually, it was the best thing I could have possibly have done.
Okay.
It was such a positive thing for them. Like I saw my mum and my brother at a book event, having everyone applauding them for supporting me in me telling this story, and them saying like, oh gosh, this is a really great, you know. And actually, I think it's the idea that it's people were helped by the fact that I was this open and they were a part of it. They really understood, and it was really empowering. And I think that's the biggest shock to me about writing that book, and just in general realizing that I do that in my life in other ways. I am open and I say stuff, and just the power of someone in the public eye talking about trauma or mental health or anything, actually, that people connect to that and think, oh God, I'm not alone. If they seem to have got it together and they seem to be okay, but the common thing is that they've got it together because they have talked about it and because they've been open about it. It's like coming out in any form is a positive thing. I believe that, and for people who say it isn't, I want to slap them.
Yeah.
Because you're encouraging people to stay in a place of ill health.
Yeah.
And I just can't, I don't, when people say that, especially to young actors, for example, about coming out, it makes me furious.
I remember a dinner we had in LA long time ago, and you really opened my eyes to something I guess naively hadn't thought about before, that before people come out, they are being forced to live a lie.
Yes.
And I hadn't thought about the weight of living with lies like that.
So it's bad for your health.
I understood. Okay, yes, of course, it's painful. You're hiding in some ways, but somehow the idea that it was a lie and the heaviness of that was really
and the sort of the physical manifestations that are potential physical manifestations of that lie and that secret life are for your body, just as you're in a holistic way, is terrible. And I think it's nobody, I feel, comes out and wishes they hadn't, because they are immediately embraced, but they also are. It's such a relief. Well, when you have a lie and you want to tell people, or you've that something, a secret, you want to. When you tell the secret, it is liberating.
Sometimes you just
Well,
Make sure
you're
you tell
ba-
the secret
you're
to
like
the right
worst
person.
in the world to say this sentence to, but okay, you win. But you know what I mean.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
a liberation
Yes,
from,
for sure.
and I'm sure there was a liberation for you when, I mean, even it was, wasn't there? And like when
Yeah,
the truth came out about,
oh gosh,
not about the affair necessarily, but about the other
No.
stuff, wasn't there? I mean, it was
it's
a nightmare,
so
but
tangled
yes, it's
in
two
so many, and I was so young.
tendrils.
But I think, yeah.
But like now,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do you think that happened to me? I did that. I made some wrong
Mistake.
decisions.
Yeah.
But now I've come through it, and I am a happy person, and that's what happened to me. And I'm not going to. You can apologize for things, but it's not. You can't change it.
Right.
So there's a liberation in being able to say that happened.
Yeah.
And
Well, I think for me, it was, I think that a lot of the work I had to do when I came out of graduate school, and I thought I had gone to graduate school thinking, okay, now I'm going to start my real life as Monica Lewinsky, whoever I was supposed to be, and came out and couldn't get a
Right.
job.
Yeah.
I think that so much of the work I had to do in that, what I call the dark decade, which you were
Yes.
there for.
Yes.
And
All your great inventions.
yeah.
That's what I think of you in that wee house.
Oh, yeah, I still have them.
So honestly, people will not notice that. So those years where you had a couple of houses in LA, and you would sort of, and I would go for parties or premieres or things, and you wouldn't be able to come to them because
No.
it's public things. And so we'd go into your house or you'd come to my hotel, and all through that time you would have all these fantastic ideas. Like I was like, oh my God, Monica, this is like the best idea ever. You've got to like get, and that's what you did. You were basically like an inventor,
Exactly.
like a secret
Einstein
inventor.
and me.
Remember the thing with the cans of juice, the cans of fizzy.
Cause cola.
That was fantastic.
Yep.
So each you could take a can of cola according to a thing you want to support, a charity you want to
Exactly.
support. Then there was the thing about the bags for your bags.
Purse Poncho.
Loved purse point. And snappy names as well. What were the other ones?
There was this one was, I think, kind of came from you, or maybe you did, was Star Ruffs or Starbucks. It was supposed to be the dog biscuits at Starbucks for the dogs.
That's right. Oh, that's right. Oh gosh, they should do that. Do you know? I had another one. I had one which I still think people should do. It's all the more now when everyone's sort of embracing more feminine-y things in men's looks, nail varnish and stuff. Lip salve for men with a bit of colour in it, and I thought Mac should do it because I was doing something with Mac Cosmetics. And I remember I said this to the head of Mac, and he was like, but call it Maccho.
Oh,
Mac
that
show.
is brilliant.
Thank you.
Okay, that's fucking brilliant.
It's good, isn't it?
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah. So,
Mac,
but
you should listen to this.
hello.
It's not too late. We could both be moguls.
Honestly, but that's what I think of you in that time, is you like sitting in your little house.
I tried. I was a little
inventing
engine
things.
that could. I kept trying.
You certainly
I kept
did.
Trying.
You
but
certainly did.
Sort of looping back when you had your, I think you called it your nervous bee.
Nervy
Is that
bee,
it?
nervy bee.
Nervy bee.
Yeah.
Nervy bee. I've used that, except I've said nervous bee.
Oh.
So sorry.
Fine.
So you weren't talking to your dad, but
No.
then part of wasn't part of kind of coming out of that spiral was then.
Totally confronting my father. Yes. And it was funny actually because it was my mum who suggested it.
Wow.
I mean, I was in the middle of this thing. I was remembering all these things. I was having a lot of therapy. I was doing, I'd had time off to just sort of wade my way through this mire. And I went to talk to my mum about it. And she suggested that I should go and talk to my father, which I don't know, I just didn't see coming. I didn't see her suggesting that. She was very much, he was sort of estranged from us, and then my therapist also suggested. I mean, I think it's, when you now it seems like, well, duh, that's the most obvious thing you've got to do in this process.
Oh.
But when you're in the middle of it, you don't know you think it's, you don't see any way out, and you don't sort of see a sort of logical trajectory. Mm-hmm. But obviously any confronting your abuser is a really powerful and necessary, if you can, if they're alive, and if you have the power and the strength to do so. So I did that. I went, and my brother came with me. We went to confront my dad, and he was still living in the house that we'd grown up in, and had been, some terrible things had happened in it, violence and stuff, and we told him we were going to see him. We hadn't seen him for years at this point, years. So I think he knew something was up, and he knew that I was separated by this point. So he knew stuff was going on, but we said to him, we'd like to go for a walk. We couldn't go into the house. And I still haven't been able to go into that house. Like I was doing this show with Miriam Margolyes when we sort of went around Scotland in a van together for Channel 4. And I went to the house. We went to the house, and it's all been changed now. And there's other, it's lovely. It's not this because it was in a sawmill yard because of the forestry thing, and all the sheds that are now I got kind of thrown across by my father, are now lovely sort of rustic homes, and they've all been. So it's really bizarre. But the people that we sat outside the house I lived in, and I just couldn't go inside. Even a couple of years ago, I didn't want to. I thought I don't want to go in with a film crew and be.
No. I don't
even know. And then my brother, a couple of days later, he went in with my mum. We went back to the house. We went on a walk, and in a way, because of the walk, I can remember it. I remember what happened at different parts of we walked around the estate grounds, and I'd written it all down. Written it all down.
In like, what do you mean?
I wrote him a letter that I just wanted to have the backup of making sure that I said all the things that we wanted to say. And so I had that. And it was terrifying. I mean, we were both terrified. And I thought my dad was going to hit me at one point. I really thought he was going to hit me. He had a stick, like a kind of, not a walking, but like a staff that, you use when you're hiking sort of thing. And he had these boots. And I remember his boots were making this sort of the little tacks on them, making this crunchy noise on the road as we were walking along. And he was sort of whacking the stick against the side of his boot, this kind of thing. And a couple of the things I said, like I remember when I said, I want to ask you about your childhood. I'm curious about if this kind of abuse happened to you, and if there's some sort of lineage to this I'm trying to make sense of this. I was aware that I was trying not to do too much therapy speak, but obviously I was. But and he said, when I remember at that point, he said that nothing happened to him in his childhood, and he got really angry when I tried to bring that up, and I thought he was going to hit me then. And then also he said, I remember it was a terrible moment when he said I said, why do you think you started hitting us? And was it to do with the fact that you were starting to have affairs outside of the marriage and things, and it was your guilt that was making, you were acting out these things? Would you think that was maybe what it was? I was really trying to make sense of it. And of course that I realize now is a foolish thing, because you're never going to get sense, you're never going to get logic from someone who is mentally ill or is,
I know.
is
Me, I'm like, well, maybe.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. So, it was a necessary part of the process. But I remember he said, my marriage was over 3 years after Tommy was born. He said that as some sort of, validation or sort of thing. And I remember thinking, wow, thank you so much. That's 3 years before I was born.
Wow.
And then right then I thought he was going to hit me again as well. So it was incredibly empowering, because we said all these things, and we said, it's up to you now. If this happened, we are giving it back to you. I mean, I was obviously doing loads of therapy talk now that I think about it, but we're giving it back to you. This is. I don't want to carry this anymore. I don't want to carry this. I don't want to feel ashamed of it. I don't want to protect you. I'm telling you this so that I can move forward. That's what's been wrong with me recently. That's what's happened. That's why my life's been turned upside down. And I'm done. We're both done. We're moving, And if you want to be a part of our life, you have to come to us and explain or say something, or we didn't use the word apologize, but say you've got to step up. and be a part of it and not ignore this. And so as we went away, he walked away into the nursery, down the steps into where the trees were. It was a nursery where trees were growing. And I remember thinking he had tears in his eyes. I remember thinking he was upset. I could see that. And then we walked away and got into the car, and I was shaking, absolutely shaking. And the funny thing was, Tom said to me, "Well done, Alan. You hardly use the script at all." Like it was some sort of play I'd done. But it was just, we were both just, we'd done this incredible thing. We'd faced our demon. And we'd done it in the place where it happened as well. Not in the house, but still, a lot of it happened outside in these grounds and certainly around the house, lots and lots, because we'd always put to work on the estate. So we did that, and it was incredible.
I have a weird question. When you were talking about that, like you were giving it back to him, you were no longer going to carry this burden. I feel like sometimes when I've been in situations like that, I believe it 80%. And there's still 20% that's whatever. But when you're telling the story, it sounds like you had 100% conviction.
Yeah.
And so was there any part of you that wasn't sure you were ready to let it go, or wasn't sure what would happen, wasn't sure you would be okay with whatever happened?
Oh, well, absolutely. But what I was absolutely sure about was that it was not possible for me to continue in my life without some acknowledgement from him that it had happened. Okay. And so, giving it back, I suppose giving it back is the wrong thing. It's sort of sharing it. I still have it. I mean, my God. I just remembered something else the other day. And it's, moments that suddenly just come into your mind, and you think, and I sort of think, whoa, what happened then? Why am I thinking? Why am I remembering this? Or why has that memory been extended a wee bit? And that's why I wrote the second memoir, because I was so scared that everybody was going to think, oh, it's all fine, it's all wrapped up. Especially in America, people love the idea that you do a book saying, hey, I've had this trauma, I've had this abuse, and I'm fine. I grew, I'm a nice, kind person, and they think that's the end. And I wanted to partly write this other book was to say, actually, trauma continues, and you just have to you just get better at dealing with it. And so this memory that I've been having a lot recently is an example of that. And, I'll talk to my brother about it the next time I see him, but you have to make peace with the fact you're not going to get satisfaction. You're not going to get a resolution.
Yeah.
And not just because my dad's dead, but just that it's, when someone is illogical and irrational and mentally ill, there's not going to be, it's not all wrapped up nicely.
So something you were saying, it was interesting, reminded me of this thing my therapist talks about a lot that I'm always repeating, of her thing that trauma doesn't go away, it's an echo.
Yeah.
And the echo, the longer it goes, the sort of more it dissipates.
Yes.
But
I suppose new things can come up.
Right, which is what you were saying that you've, and I've had these kinds of experiences too, and it's so fascinating where something sort of flits in, right?
Yeah.
And you're kind of like, oh, we've been here before. And then it, almost like origami or something, or those old, it's like another layer just opens, and you're kind of going, what's this? Yeah.
That's actually the thing when you said flits in, that's my experience of the one time I had a sort of suicidal sort of things, that was what it felt like. It was flit. It was like, your periphery's like this, all this mental periphery, and then all of a sudden it's just sort of like this, a little things, and it's just an idea it becomes an option. It's just it's not like, oh, I'm going to kill myself.
No.
It's like, things are really shit right now. I could do this. That looks horrible. This way's looking awful. Oh God, do I have to do that? And then like, oh, that's another option.
Yeah.
And then, blah, blah, blah. And that scared me.
Yeah.
Because of the way that it just flitted in. And so the way that thoughts and like negative thoughts, I think, are more flitters. In that way.
I remember for me, it would often be, I would be like, oh, I would just pray to not wake up.
Oh, darn it. Yeah.
So, but it's, but you're talking about suicide. I don't know if you remember, I'm fairly certain I told you and Grant that probably over 10 years ago, I had this insane, intense dream where I had gotten on a roller coaster in Las Vegas it was like 6 people standing next to each other, and you would get on at this very high thing. 6 people get on and it drops, and the whole point was it was a suicide ride. The whole point was like, you do not get off the ride.
Oh my God.
And halfway down, I changed my mind. And you and Grant flew up.
Oh.
And you got me out. And then you flew.
I do remember this.
Yeah. And I just, and that's sort of what was interesting to me about that dream, and so kind of reinforced in this conversation for me too, is just around, we don't always talk about the details of the pain between us. Like I feel like when we see each other, oh, this happened and this happened. Oh, this was hard and this was hard. But there's sort of there's that sort of silent language of trauma.
Yes.
And so sometimes I think because I have the friends, right, that we're always, all the details and all the this and all the that all the time. And that dream just really showed me how much you guys mean to me. And
likewise, Monica, you know that. We love you so much.
I love you guys.
You know what I dreamt about recently? I saw Anna Wintour coming out of the shower. And my thing was, I don't know why, but my thing was, I went, your hair, because you never see her hair without her little helmet hair. And she had wet hair, like people have.
Okay, you have to tell me what your therapist says that meant.
I haven't told him yet. I forgot to talk about dreams this week.
This has been amazing. I'm so grateful to you for doing
darling,
this.
Thank you. I always love chatting with you.
I know, and we
it's
really
so great we get a chance to do it. We don't have to wait. We don't have to eat.
I know.
We don't have to go elsewhere.
And there aren't other people interrupting the conversation.
It's so true.
2 big egos.
I thought that when I did my podcast, it was during COVID. And it was just such a nice way to talk to people, to get to talk to your friends.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a sad indictment that you have to do a podcast in order to get a proper chat, isn't it? We need to make sure we have more. We should go on retreats, Monica, you and I.
Oh, I'm down for
Grant
that.
Schaefer can come.
Yeah, exactly. Grant's allowed. And Mary Darling.
And Mary Darling. We can go to our house in the country.
Yeah. Exactly.
The weekend. Or in our new house in Scotland.
Yeah, you sent me photos. I'm very jealous.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
I just love it so much.
Oh,
I love it
beautiful.
so much. I feel completely at peace.
Whole.
Yes. I feel whole. Sounds dirty. It's like this lady in Edinburgh who has a bagel shop. She's from Montreal. She named a bagel after me, and it's called Bross. Her name's Lara Bross, and it's called Bross's Bagels. And her whole thing is fill your hole. That's her sort of motto of the bagel shop. And when she wanted to do a bagel named after me, she wanted to call it Coming in Your Hole. And I said no, we will not. And I called it the Wholesome Coming instead. I kind of flipped it.
Yeah, I think that's better.
Yeah.
I don't have a bagel named after me. Yeah.
Well, yet life is long.
Yeah, I do not even want to encourage that. Actually, I know. Cut. That's an erase part of the. No, really. Thank you so much.
It's
for this.
Total pleasure.